At Christmas dinner, my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not family anymore." I didn't flinch. I just picked up the envelope she thought I hadn't seen, the one that erased me from my own home. The next morning, I placed a flash drive under the dining table. Quiet, planned, loaded with everything they didn't expect. And believe me, that was only the beginning. Before we go further, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. The cold had settled early in Tacoma this year, the kind that seeped through the cracks in the window frames and under doorways, no matter how many draft stoppers were shoved beneath them. Sitting by the front window, I could see the neighborhood lights beginning to flicker on, reds, whites, blues, some blinking in rhythmic patterns, others steady and quiet. I remembered when I used to climb the ladder to hang our own lights, when Aurelia would hand me clips through the window and shout, "A little higher," from the driveway. But this year, the lights were Kendra's, sleeker, store-bought, all white. No mismatched bulbs, no childhood ornaments, no warm glow of homemade garlands. Just sterile perfection. It was strange how a house could still be yours and no longer feel like home. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood polish. The decorations had gone up last weekend while I was at the pharmacy. When I returned, the tree was already dressed, the stockings were hung, and a new wreath, pre-lit, faux pine, was nailed to the mantel where Aurelia's hand-stitched quilt used to hang. I didn't say anything, I just stared at it for a long moment, then put the milk in the fridge and pretended it didn't matter. Kendra had a way of filling space that left no room for memory. I sat back in my chair and picked up my phone, intending to send Silas a reminder about our Sunday chess match. He was 16 now, taller than me already, but still kind enough to humor his old grandfather once a week. As I tapped open the messaging app, a small alert at the top caught my attention. "You have been removed from Flynn Holiday Planning." It must have been a mistake. Maybe Silas was messing with the settings. I tapped to rejoin, but the group was now private. The name had been changed to Flynn Holiday Planning. Not Family Holiday Planning, not even Flynn Mathers Planning, which Aurelia used to insist on when she was around. Just their last name, just them. For a moment, my finger hovered above the screen. I thought about asking Rourke, but the quiet in this house wasn't made for questions like that. It would come off as bitterness. Instead, I pressed the back button and opened my solitaire app. The cards shuffled. Hearts and spades, black and red, familiar, even if no longer comforting. The next morning, the mail arrived with the soft clunk of the metal flap snapping shut. I shuffled out in slippers to check the box, collecting a thin bundle of catalogs, bills, and one heavy, glossy envelope. The return label said, "The Flynn Family." I already knew. Inside was a photo card. Kendra, Rourke, Silas, and Max, their golden retriever, posed in front of the fireplace I built brick by brick in the winter of '83. Everyone wore matching cream sweaters. Even the dog had a red scarf. The photo was clean, polished, professional. The names were printed in cursive gold script. With love, Rourke, Kendra, Silas, Max. There was no space, no comma, no "and Dad." The paper felt stiff in my hands. Not just in texture, it was the kind of stiffness that pushes someone out without saying the words. I folded it neatly and placed it back in the envelope, setting it beside the fruit bowl on the kitchen counter. At dinner that evening, the silence stretched like a taut string. Kendra made chicken piccata. Rourke stayed glued to his phone, scrolling and nodding absently to whatever Kendra said. I pushed peas across my plate. "So, we've streamlined communication this year," Kendra said casually, not looking at me. Group texts were getting messy. Too many conflicting suggestions. She said it the way she always did, pleasant on the outside, dismissive underneath. I nodded once. No words left the table in my direction. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms. I settled into my recliner by the window, the same chair I used when Silas was a baby and had trouble sleeping. I'd rock slowly, humming old lullabies while Aurelia warmed milk in the kitchen. Now, the leather under my fingers was cracked and soft, worn from decades of use. I ran my hand along the armrest, eyes fixed on the envelope still sitting on the counter, catching a sliver of moonlight. "I'm still here," I whispered to the empty room. "I built this." The house didn't respond, just the quiet hum of the heater kicking on, the faint creak of old pipes. I leaned back, watching shadows dance across the ceiling. The envelope, untouched, seemed to glow faintly under the kitchen light, as if it might rewrite itself if I stared hard enough. But some deletions aren't accidents. She was erasing me one room at a time. It started with the photo. I had gone to the living room that morning to hang a fresh garland, one of the few holiday tasks I still claimed as mine. Aurelia had crocheted the red and green trim herself years ago, and though a few threads had frayed, it still smelled faintly of cedar and clove. But when I reached for the wall where our family photo used to hang, me, Aurelia, and baby Rourke sitting on the porch steps in summer light, it wasn't there. In its place was a large canvas, abstract and cold, all angles and dark gray swirls. At the bottom, stenciled in black block letters, were the words, "The Flynn Legacy." I stood there longer than I should have, the garland in my hands wilting under its own weight. No one had said a word, no discussion, no asking. The photo had hung there for 35 years. Now it was gone, replaced by branding. Later that afternoon, the heater stuttered. A series of hollow clanks echoed from the vents, followed by a sharp silence. I went to the hallway closet to grab the utility file, still organized the way I'd left it. Labels marked gas, water, electric. I dialed the number I'd always called. "Hi there. I'm calling about the heater. Name's Tilden Mathers," I said. There was a pause. "Sir, I'm sorry. You're not listed on this account. We can't schedule anything without the primary account holder's approval." "I've lived here 42 years, I said. Another pause. "You'll need to have the account holder contact us directly." When I checked the latest electric bill, my heart slowed. The name on the account had changed. Every utility bill now read, Kendra Flynn. Not even Rourke, just Kendra. It felt deliberate, like finding your own name crossed out on your mailbox. That evening, I waited until dinner. I didn't bring it up right away. I waited until Kendra left the room to grab her laptop. "Rourke," I said, voice low, steady. "Did you know the bills aren't in my name anymore?" He barely looked up. "Yeah, Kendra handles everything now. Makes it easier." "That wasn't something It's just housekeeping, Dad," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "No big deal." My sentence trailed off before I could finish it. He was already back on his phone, his thumb scrolling through whatever required more attention than his father's voice. I nodded, though nothing about me agreed. That night, I ate alone in the kitchen. The dining room was alive with soft conversation and wine glasses clinking. I could hear Kendra laughing about something, probably one of her business podcasts. Rourke chuckled when she said something sharp. From where I sat, I could see the living room. Everything looked different now. The floral doilies Aurelia once embroidered were gone, replaced with smooth, metallic end tables. The amber lamp with its stained glass shade had been swapped out for sleek chrome standing lights. Even the couch cushions had changed, firm, colorless, unwelcoming. There was no trace of her in that room, no trace of me either. I scraped the remaining peas into the trash and rinsed the plate in silence. Later, when the house had quieted, I walked down to the basement. It used to be my sanctuary, half storage, half workshop. Over the years, I had built shelves, cabinets, picture frames, even Silas's first toy chest down there. It had smelled of sawdust and old radio static. Now it smelled like cardboard and lavender disinfectant. All my tools were gone, packed in neatly labeled bins stacked against the far wall. Donation, they read, written in Kendra's looping cursive. My workbench had been cleared, replaced by a folding table draped in beige linen. I stood there, blinking against the overhead bulb's harsh light. My fingers reached for a wooden frame I'd carved decades ago, curved maple with inlaid walnut trim. The back had "Happy Anniversary, A+T" scratched faintly in pencil. Across the glass, in thick black marker, someone had written, "Do not keep." I didn't say anything, just placed the frame back where it sat. As I climbed the stairs, each step creaked louder than the last. Near the landing, I heard Kendra's voice drift from the kitchen upstairs. "We need to clear out the garage next." I stopped mid-step. My knuckles grazed the banister. They were moving room by room, quietly, efficiently, as if I were already gone. The door to my bedroom clicked shut behind me, not slammed, not even firmly, just shut, softly, as if that gesture alone could keep the rest of the house at bay. I didn't bother turning on the overhead light. The low glow from the street lamp outside spilled through the curtain, enough to guide my feet across the room I'd shared with Aurelia for nearly 5 decades. I was looking for a screwdriver. The hallway light switch had gone loose again. A tiny task, something to fix, something to do. I pulled open the top drawer of my nightstand, and the scent hit me before my eyes could adjust. Old paper, dust and dried ink. There, tucked beneath a faded photo of Aurelia at the Oregon coast, was an envelope I didn't recognize. It was addressed to me in her handwriting. On the front, in slanted, careful script, "If things ever feel like they're slipping." I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at it. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the flap. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, yellowed at the edges. Her writing was unmistakable. Looped L's, slanted T's, every word pressed with a deliberate, loving hand. The date in the corner, 2 months before she died. "My Tilden, I know you. I know how easily you let things slide, how much you'd rather keep the peace than speak. I love that about you. But if they ever make you feel like you don't matter, remember, you built this. They just decorate." I didn't breathe for a moment. The words landed like a weight against my ribs. "Promise me, if they forget you, you'll remind them who you are." I folded the letter once, carefully. My hand lingered on the crease. The silence in the room thickened. Not peaceful, not restful, just thick. Kindness becoming silence. That had always been my pattern. The gentle shrug, the smile that meant, "It's fine." But nothing about this was fine. Aurelia had seen this coming. Maybe not in its specifics, but in its spirit. She always did. I tried to sleep after that, but the bed felt too big. The ceiling fan hummed an uneven rhythm above me. After a while, I rose and headed for the kitchen to get a glass of water. My bare feet patted against the cool hardwood. I moved slowly, not wanting to wake anyone. Halfway down the hall, just past the staircase, I paused. Voices. Kendra's. Hushed, but clear. "Once we get guardianship in place, he can't stop us from doing anything." My chest constricted. Then Rourke, uncertain. "You sure the doctor will sign off? He barely speaks to anyone but the kid. That's not stable." There was a silence that hung heavy. I stood motionless by the banister, every nerve taut. So that was their plan. It wasn't just about redecorating or streamlining bills. They weren't erasing my presence. They were trying to erase my authority. The kindness I'd shown them, letting them move in, giving Rourke space after he lost his job, letting Kendra take over bills when I had a health scare, was now being rewritten into evidence of decline. My fingers clenched around the cold glass. I had been so careful, so quiet, hoping it was just shifting roles, modern families, a new rhythm I hadn't caught up to. But this wasn't rhythm. It was removal. I backed away without a sound, returned to my room, and sat back down on the bed. The letter still lay beside me. I picked it up again, reread the last line. If they forget you, you'll remind them who you are. I moved to the desk in the corner and pulled open the drawer. Inside was a manila envelope, empty. I slid her letter in, sealed it, and wrote across the front in sharp black ink, proof. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at it. Then I rose and walked back to the bedroom door. It had been years since I'd used the lock. The click echoed louder than expected in the quiet. Not yet, I thought. You don't get to erase me yet. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and pulled out a notebook, blank, untouched. I flipped to the first page and, with a hand that no longer trembled, wrote one word in capital letters across the top. Guardianship. The coffee maker sputtered and groaned like it didn't want to start the day either. I poured myself a cup, sat down at the kitchen table, and waited. The silence stretched. Rourke eventually shuffled in, rubbing his eyes, scrolling on his phone. He barely looked at me. I cleared my throat. You see the invoice on the foyer table? He paused, lifted his eyes briefly, then shrugged. What about it? It's from, someplace in Portland. Designer furniture, kitchen fixtures, lighting, $22,000. Rourke sipped his coffee. Yeah, Kendra's been working on some updates. I set my cup down carefully. I wasn't told. Rourke chuckled. Not mean, just uncomfortable. Dad, you've been forgetting things a lot lately. Maybe we did talk about it. That landed sharper than I expected. I looked at him. He didn't flinch. I remember exactly what I said when I invited you here, I murmured. This would always be your home, but not without my home being mine. Rourke sighed, already slipping away from the conversation. We're not trying to step on your toes, Dad, just making it livable. Livable. As if I hadn't lived here longer than he'd been alive. Later that afternoon, I saw the boxes, piled in the foyer, brown cardboard stamped with high-end brand names. Inside were sleek dining chairs, a chandelier made of glass petals, and utensils that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread, not a family home. I flipped through the invoice again. No discount, no budget. The bill had been charged directly to the household account, the one my pension funded every month. No one had asked. No one had even mentioned it. I found Kendra on the back deck, lounging with a glass of wine. She didn't look surprised when I approached. I'd like to know when major purchases are made, I said, keeping my voice even. She didn't look up, just sipped her wine and said, The house was overdue for a facelift. I'm not a guest here. Kendra, I've earned a say. She finally met my eyes. Her smile didn't waver. We needed elegance. The house should reflect our future, not the past. The sting was immediate, sharper than a slap. I want transparency going forward, I said. She stood, still smiling. Her voice turned cool. You rest. Let us handle the adult things now. She walked inside, the screen door snapping shut behind her. I stood alone on the deck, the breeze lifting the edge of my flannel sleeve. The place smelled like lemon oil and distance. Down in the basement, I sat at my old workbench. The sawdust had long settled, the tools now boxed, but the air still held the ghost of wood and sweat and purpose. I thought of Aurelia's voice, gentle but firm. There's a cruelty in kindness if it silences truth. She used to say that when I let things slide, when I made excuses for people who chipped away at dignity with good manners, I pulled out the notebook, the one I'd labeled Guardianship. I began to write. December 4th. Designer furniture. $22, $1,000. No discussion. Paid from pension-funded account. December 5th. Told I've been forgetful. Gaslighting begins. Let us handle adult things now. Direct quote. I underlined it twice. That evening, I sat in the living room, pretending to read while the new chandelier sparkled above me like ice. Silas walked in from school, backpack slung over one shoulder. He paused when he saw me. "Grandpa, did you like the new lamp in the hallway?" he asked, unsure. I looked up, saw the concern in his eyes. Real, not curated. "No," I said softly, "but I like that you asked." He smiled, a little, then nodded. "Okay." He lingered a second longer before heading upstairs. After he disappeared, I stood and returned to my bedroom, opened the desk drawer, pulled out Aurelia's letter, laid the logbook beside it, then, with a small yellow sticky note, I wrote, "One step at a time. The garage always smelled like damp concrete and forgotten time." I hadn't spent more than a few minutes in there since the renovations began, but today I needed to clear my head. Boxes were piled high, some labeled, some not. I moved one labeled, "Tools, Don't Need," and saw a folder I didn't recognize. Manila, thick. My name scribbled in pen across the front. Tilden, Archive. I opened it slowly. Inside, neatly stapled, was a document stamped with the notary seal. At first glance, it looked like a standard legal release until the title caught my eye, Limited Guardianship Consent. Signed by me, the signature looked like mine, technically was mine, but it trembled more than I ever remembered. The date, 3 months ago, I had bronchitis that week, on prescription cough syrup, sleeping most of the day. I'd barely been eating. Vague memories surfaced, Kendra bringing me tea, papers on a clipboard. A pen nudged into my hand. But this form gave them the right to act on my behalf for health and home decisions. I sat on an overturned paint can, the paper trembling in my hands. Later that morning, I left the house, needed air, needed anything but walls that whispered betrayal. As I rounded the corner toward the park, Morella spotted me from her porch. "Tilden," she called, walking out with her watering can. "I was hoping to catch you." I tried to smile. Morella had been our neighbor for over 20 years, brought us soup when Aurelia was in chemo, held our mail when we traveled. She was one of the few who still waved. "I heard you're moving to Meadowbrook," she said gently, her voice soft but edged with curiosity. "Kendra mentioned it to my sister, said you'd be more comfortable there." I stopped cold. "Meadowbrook?" She looked surprised. "The care center near the old train depot. Lovely staff. Apparently, my cousin did rehab there. I hadn't heard a word about it, not one." I made some excuse, something about being late, and turned back toward the house. My hands clenched tighter with each step. Inside, I picked up the phone and called the one person I still trusted with documents. "Branson," I said when he picked up. "I need to talk." His voice still held that gruff courtroom edge, even in retirement. "Tilden, what's going on?" I told him about the paper, about Meadowbrook, about everything. There was silence. Then, "You still have the form?" "Yes." "Good. Don't let it out of your sight. They're trying to strip your legal standing. If that form holds, they can sell the house under your feet." I stared out the window, the snow now beginning to fall in fine, steady flurries. "Meet me tomorrow morning," he said. "I'll bring what I need." That evening, I stayed in my room. I didn't feel like sharing space, not even air. Downstairs, I heard the clink of wine glasses, music playing softly. Kendra's laughter floated upward, light, high, satisfied. Rourke chimed in now and then, his voice lower, more uncertain. They were celebrating something. Maybe it was the sale already underway. Maybe it was the idea of my name finally gone from the title deed. I pictured the glossy brochures, the email threads, the signatures. While I sat upstairs like a ghost in my own body, I locked the bedroom door again, on the desk. I placed the form next to the growing stack. Aurelia's letter, the receipts, the quotes, the notes. The folder was nearly half an inch thick now. I opened the notebook. December 6th, found notarized consent form, signed during illness, unaware of its content at the time. Conversation with Morella confirms rumors. Kendra claims I'm moving to Meadowbrook Care Center. Then I flipped to a new page. Across the top, I wrote in bold ink, "Contingency plan." Underneath, Branson, 10 o'clock a.m. Scan and duplicate all documents. Secure folder outside the house. Prepare alternate financial access. I closed the notebook. On the kitchen calendar, I circled tomorrow's date in red marker. They have no idea what I remember, I whispered to the dark. Saturday morning in Tacoma came wrapped in fog and the smell of wet pine. The law office Branson picked sat above a florist, and the scent of lilies bled through the old floorboards. I sat across from a man named Ephraim, trust and estate law etched into the lines of his neatly pressed collar. Branson handed him the folder, my folder, full of dates, audio files, receipts, and that shaky signature I didn't remember giving. Ephraim flipped through the pages with practiced speed, then paused when he tapped play on the audio. Kendra's voice crackled through the speaker, unfiltered and unmistakable. "I don't care what he built. It's ours now." The room went still. Ephraim's jaw set. He clicked the file closed. "That's enough to push back," he said evenly, "and enough to start clean." We didn't waste time. Within the hour, I signed a new will. Rourke and Kendra removed entirely. Silas named the sole beneficiary of my estate, placed into a trust with protective clauses, $10,000 allocated to the Tacoma Woodworking School, in Aurelia's name, and one clause, written in bold, "No distribution shall be made to any party who attempted to claim this property unlawfully or by coercion." I took out her letter, the one that began it all, and slipped it into the legal folder. Ephraim looked at it briefly, nodded, and slid it into the back with respect. The weight in my chest eased, just slightly, like I'd placed a stone back where it belonged. That afternoon, the house was louder than usual. Rourke and Kendra hosted a rehearsal dinner of sorts, family arriving tomorrow for the full gathering. The living room buzzed with movement. I stayed near the edge, unnoticed. The slideshow ran on loop. Photos danced across the wall. Rourke's graduation, Kendra at her old firm's gala, Silas in soccer uniforms, the house in various stages of remodel, decked in holiday garlands and new gray tones, their life on display. But not one image of me, no 4th of July barbecue I manned for 2 decades, no Thanksgiving carving, not even a frame from Aurelia's last Christmas. Even the one photo she had by the fireplace, cropped. Her hand still rested on someone's shoulder, but the shoulder was gone. I felt like a ghost being erased in real time. Kendra brushed past me holding 2 wine glasses, her perfume sweet and overdone. "We're keeping the focus modern," she said with a quick glance at the screen. "You understand?" I nodded once. Inside, something locked into place. I will not be a ghost before I'm dead. That night, in my room, I checked the cloud sync on my phone. The audio was uploaded. The scan of the will, even the photo from the slideshow, time-stamped, without me in it. Everything was backed up twice, downstairs. The house hummed with wine and idle chatter. I stood quietly in the living room after they'd gone to bed. The frame of Aurelia's wedding photo sat on the bookshelf, turned backward. Like a mistake, I picked it up, dusted the edge with my thumb, and set it upright, front and center. Not rebellion, reclamation. The dining room was still set from earlier, placemats adjusted, centerpiece fluffed. I bent down, lifted the tablecloth, and stuck a small flash drive with a strip of painter's tape beneath the table. I pressed it firm into the wood I'd varnished decades ago. Then stood. Tomorrow, they'd all sit above it. The scent of rosemary and pine floated through the halls, masked only slightly by too much perfume and the sugary tang of mulled wine. Relatives I hadn't seen in years drifted through the living room in coats too new and shoes too clean. The welcome table was covered with pine cones and candles, but no photos of the past, not even of Aurelia, not even of me. Instead, a glossy poster leaned against the mantel. The Flynn family, a new chapter. At the top, Bold letters. Rourke Kendra Flynn. No Mathers. No Aurelia. No me. I stood by the window, nodding when people greeted me, offering that polite half-smile that keeps the room from feeling cold. But inside, the numbness curled tighter. Dinner began at 7. Candlelight flickered along the table, bouncing off crystal and silver. I was seated at the far end, across from the coat closet, next to a cousin who kept checking her phone. Silas gave me a quick wave from his seat between his parents. He looked uncomfortable in his dress shirt, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Midway through the salad course, Kendra rose, tapping her glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" The room quieted. Rourke looked down at his plate. Kendra smiled brightly, too brightly. "I just wanted to say how grateful we are to be together tonight. This year has been a journey, a transformation for our family. We've embraced a more modern, intentional way of living, letting go of outdated roles, healing old wounds." She turned slightly, voice softening. "We've discussed this privately. From this moment, we'll move on as a renewed family. We've made peace with what no longer fits." She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. Every pair of eyes turned toward me, some confused, some pitying. A few, relieved. My hand tightened around the fork. I stood, pushing my chair back gently. "I'd like to say something." Kendra stepped in before I could breathe. "No need to respond, Dad." Her voice was sugar on steel. "Let's enjoy tonight peacefully." Murmurs flickered across the table like static. I nodded once, then sat. Silas stared at his plate. The meal continued. Lamb with cranberry glaze, mashed sweet potatoes. I tasted none of it. After the pie, the lights dimmed. A projector whirred to life. Kendra's voice, light and narrating, played as photos of their year slid across the screen. The remodeled kitchen, Rourke at his new job, Silas's school play, the living room with its new chandelier, Kendra's yoga retreat, Silas at summer camp, then Christmases past, or, at least, what they'd made of them. Even the photo from last year, the one in front of the fireplace, had been edited. Aurelia's arm hung in the shot, resting over an invisible shoulder. Mine. I excused myself. No one stopped me. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened Instagram. Kendra had already posted. Aurelia's wedding china glistened on the table in the background, her caption floating above it. "We rebuilt from the ashes, and this Christmas marks our clean beginning." Clean. I walked to the desk, unlocked the drawer, and pulled out the folder. Each document had weight now. The will, the consent form, Aurelia's letter, the logs, the audio. "They've rewritten enough," I whispered. "Time to restore the truth." The dining room shimmered with candlelight and red wine. The scent of rosemary lamb heavy in the air. Crystal glasses caught every flicker. Polished silverware perfectly aligned on monogrammed napkins. It was a picture-perfect Christmas dinner. Kendra stood at the head of the table, dressed in emerald green, her hair twisted into something sharp. She lifted her glass with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "After much discussion," she began, "we've decided it's time for a generational change. This home, and its future, now rests with us." A few forks paused mid-air. Glasses trembled slightly in hands. The silence cracked. Rourke didn't say a word. His eyes stayed on the table. I didn't move, but I reached down, slow and steady, to the folder I had taped under the seat of my chair. The room shifted with whispers. Kendra looked confused for half a second, then wary. I stood. "I have a few things to share before dessert," I said calmly, from beneath my seat. I pulled out a dozen neatly labeled envelopes. One by one, I handed them around the table, each landing gently in front of a relative. Cousin June, Uncle Leonard, Aunt Claire. Each envelope bore a single word in cursive, clarity. Some hands hesitated. Inside, copies of my revised will, revoking all inheritance rights from Rourke and Kendra, the notarized freeze on household accounts, The transcript of Kendra saying, "I don't care what he built. It's ours now." The transfer of legal authority to Branson. And a list of household purchases made from my pension, annotated in red. Kendra shot up from her seat. "This is manipulative," she snapped. "He's not well. You all know that." Before anyone could respond, Silas stood. He was pale, but firm. "He's more lucid than anyone here." He turned to his father, voice steady. "You knew, and you let her do this?" Rourke opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Around the table, pages turned, eyes widened. Some guests pushed their chairs back slowly, discomfort thick in the air. No one reached for the wine. No one touched dessert. Kendra sputtered, "You can't. This isn't how families—" I didn't raise my voice, didn't yell. "You made your choice," I said quietly. "I made mine." Then I turned and walked out of the room. Not a slammed door, not a dramatic storm out, just a man leaving a table where he no longer belonged. That night, hours later, when the house had dimmed and the laughter had thinned to silence, I returned. Soft steps, no lights. I walked to Rourke and Kendra's bedroom, left a small box on their perfectly fluffed bed. Inside, a framed photo of Aurelia and me, taken just after we moved in, her hand resting on my chest, both of us laughing. Underneath, in delicate script, "This was once full. You emptied it." No note, no need. I slipped out the front door. The porch was cold, the lights twinkling overhead. I walked down the driveway into the night, past the hedges Aurelia once trimmed, past the mailbox still bearing my name. Each breath steamed into the air. Each step felt lighter. The morning after Christmas felt colder than usual, though the thermostat hadn't changed. Light filtered through the curtains in strips, landing on the boxes Tilden had stacked by the door. Not to pack, just to move them. Just to remind himself that some things still had his touch. His hand hovered over the mouse as he sifted through morning emails, bills, newsletters, a recipe link from Morella. Then he saw it. A forwarded message. Not to him directly, but a mistaken CC from Kendra to a real estate agent. Subject: "Home ready to list next week. Owner legally cleared." He read it again, and again. Then he printed it. The printer hummed like a whisper in a funeral home. The email slid from the tray. He placed it next to the will, the trust, the recordings, the folder labeled Phase 2. Outside, the decorations still blinked, lights draped on railings, a blow-up Santa leaning slightly from the wind, but the house itself, silent. Tilden walked the perimeter, starting from the front door, past the porch steps he'd repaired last spring. The paint was new, beige, not the deep navy Aurelia loved. The fireplace bricks, now covered with gray tile. His workshop, gutted. The wooden pegs gone, shelves dismantled, the smell of sawdust replaced by lemon cleanser. As he reached the edge of the driveway, his eyes caught a glimpse of something in the trash bin, not the large black one, but the green yard waste container. He lifted the lid. Inside lay the carved wooden chair he'd made for Aurelia after her last round of chemo, a small rocker, her name etched along the top rail. Cracked now, thick black marker across its seat. Free. Tilden stood frozen, not from the cold. After a long breath, he rolled the bin back to the garage, chair and all. He didn't want it on the street, not yet. Rourke was organizing paint cans when Tilden stepped into the garage. No yelling, no rage, just, "Was there even a moment you thought this wasn't wrong?" Rourke's hands paused mid-labeling. He didn't turn. "We just wanted a fresh start," he said. "You wouldn't have let go." Tilden stared at his son. "I didn't hold too tight," he said quietly. "You let go too soon." Rourke finally looked at him, but there was no apology in his eyes, just resignation. Later, on the porch, Silas found him sitting with a blanket draped over his knees, a thermos of lukewarm coffee in hand. "Grandpa?" the boy asked, voice careful. Tilden tilted his head in greeting. Silas hesitated. then sat down beside him. "Was it true?" he asked. "All of it?" Tilden didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the folded email, and handed it over. Silas read it silently, then folded it again, slower this time, as if sealing something permanent. He placed a hand on Tilden's shoulder. "I believe you." No more needed to be said. As the sun began to dip behind the fir trees, casting the yard in gold and shadow, Morella walked by the fence with her corgi in tow. She paused, looked up, and said softly, "We all heard." Tilden said nothing. Morella added, "And some of us are done pretending Kendra's the hero." Her eyes held something close to grief, or loyalty, or both. Tilden gave her a nod. Inside, he unfolded the printed email and placed it in a new envelope, marked in bold pen, Phase 2. That night, the house was quiet again, but not silent like grief, more like the pause before a gavel drops. Tilden sat at the desk in his room, pulled out a clean sheet of paper, and began to write. Not for court, not for lawyers, for the people who still believed in what was right. The cafe had always been too bright for my taste. New owners, newer tiles, and coffee that came in cups too light to hold real weight. But the view near the window was steady. That mattered more now. I picked up the folded paper on the rack like I had every Thursday since 1981. My fingers hesitated when I saw the headline, "When the Elderly Refuse to Let Go." No byline, just bold, cold ink. I didn't need to guess. The phrasing matched Kendra's offhanded remark last fall. This generation clings to legacy like it's a retirement plan. I sat down, unfolded the paper, and read it through, not one fact, just impressions, perceptions, the kind that spread fast in a small town. I folded the paper with precision, tucking it into the folder in my satchel. The waitress, new and cheerful, brought me black coffee. "Morning, sir," she said with a smile too soft for the bitterness around us. "So, now I'm a headline," I muttered, raising the cup. By noon, I was back at the house, but it didn't feel like mine. The wreath still hung on the door, an empty gesture after last night. I stepped inside, boots still damp. The air felt stale. My phone buzzed. "Morella, I tried to visit this morning," she said. "Rourke stopped me, told me it's not safe for you to see outsiders." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped. "He said you were confused, that you might lash out." I stood still, not out of shock, but strategy. They weren't just isolating me, they were controlling the narrative. "Thank you," I told her. "And thank you for not believing it." "They're underestimating you, Tilden," she said. "People are watching." I hung up and added Morella's name to the list in my notebook. Another circle drawn. Another attempt to erase the lines I'd built. Later that afternoon, I heard footsteps outside my door. Then a soft knock. "Tilden?" It was Silas. Before I could answer, I heard Kendra's voice behind him. "Let your grandfather rest, sweetheart. He needs space from all this." Silence. Then retreating steps. When I opened the door, no one was there, except for a sealed envelope lying neatly on the mat. I picked it up, opened it. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten. "I know what they're doing. I don't agree." My eyes closed, just for a moment, not out of sadness, out of steadiness. He was still with me. That night, I sat at my desk. The folder had grown. Legal documents, emails, logs, screenshots, photos. I opened my laptop, titled "A New Document." Timeline of Manipulation, a Personal Account. I laid out every date, every decision, every exclusion. I included photos of the holiday card, screen captures from the group chat I was removed from, and a transcript of the guardianship meeting I'd secretly recorded from my room. Before sending, I hovered over the "to" field. I could have emailed it to every guest from the dinner, or to the newspaper that ran Kendra's op-ed. But that wasn't the point. Instead, I printed every page and slid it into a thick manila envelope. I labeled it with 2 names, Branson, Ephraim, people who still remembered what it meant to honor a life built in daylight, not erased in shadows. I stepped outside into the frost. My boots crunched against the driveway, the cold air biting my ears. Halfway down the block, I turned around and looked at the house, still lit with Christmas, still dressed in celebration, still lying. But I didn't stop walking. I kept going, each step firm, each breath clear. The snow began to fall again. The neighborhood looked like it was quietly exhaling. Lights came down from gutters. Plastic Santas leaned against trash bins, and wreaths were laid gently into storage tubs. The air smelled of pine sap and faint smoke from early backyard burns. It was the last breath of December, and for once, the world outside matched the stillness I carried inside. My phone buzzed mid-morning. A message from Branson. Media chatter started. Someone leaked the slideshow clip. He attached a link to a local blog. I tapped it. There, in bold, Tacoma's Holiday Shame, the Flynn family slideshow without Grandpa. The video had been trimmed and subtitled. The commentary wasn't kind. Who deletes their own father from history? This wasn't modernizing, it was erasing. The man built that fireplace, literally. I closed the tab slowly. I wasn't rattled, just affirmed. Inside, the house was unusually quiet. No music, no calls on speakerphone. I stepped into the front hallway and stopped. 3 boxes sat near the door, labeled Garage, Donate, Books, Discard, Clothes, Goodwill. My winter coat lay folded awkwardly on top, the one Aurelia had bought me during our trip to Montana. My books, annotated by my own hand, stacked in a half-crushed carton. Even my old screwdriver set, the one with the worn blue handle, was in there. I didn't argue. I didn't rage. I opened the boxes, pulled out what mattered. 1 coat, 3 books, the screwdriver. I left the rest, let them donate the shell. I still own the spine. Later that afternoon, I found Kendra in the kitchen. She didn't look up when I entered. Her phone sat face down on the counter, unread notifications buzzing beneath it like a guilty conscience. "We didn't want this to go public," she said without preamble. "This wasn't meant to hurt you." I poured myself tea, quiet, calm. "You started it the day you removed my name," I replied. There was no shouting, no thunder, just consequence, distilled into a sentence. She didn't have a response, just turned, walked out. I sipped my tea in peace. That evening, at the local community hall, a few neighbors gathered for an informal New Year's Eve warm-up. It wasn't advertised, just potluck and stories by the fire pit. Morella waved me over when I entered. Someone handed me a cup of cider. Halfway through the evening, the host, a retired teacher, asked if anyone had a memory to share, something hopeful, something real. I stood. "My first New Year in Tacoma," I began. I was 25. The house was a frame, just bones and stubborn beams. We ate on a plywood table, and Aurelia burned the stew, but we had 4 walls, heat, a roof, and every board I nailed reminded me, permanence takes work. No names, no blame, just grit and gratitude. Morella clapped first. Then the room followed. Kendra wasn't there. Rourke stood outside, visible through the hall window. But he didn't enter. I didn't wave. Later that night, back on the porch, Silas slipped beside me. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, without a word, he handed me a small photo frame. The edges were dusty, the glass a little cracked. Inside, a picture of Aurelia and me on our 40th anniversary, seated on the porch, matching mugs in hand. "I found it in the bottom of the garage bin," Silas said, before they tossed it. I looked at him. "You saved more than a photo, son." He smiled faintly, then rested his head briefly on my shoulder. When the house settled into silence again, I walked into my room. Opened the desk drawer. I laid the photo inside, and on top of it, the deed to the house, now locked in my name. The call came just before noon, while the sky was still deciding if it wanted to snow or just sulk. Branson's voice came through steady, warm, with something close to pride. "It's done," he said. "Ephraim filed the motion this morning. Guardianship declared null, coercion, manipulation, suppressed evidence. You've got full control again. Tilden." I didn't speak right away. The kettle hissed behind me, ignored. Then quietly, I replied, "Let them learn the hard way who I really was." I hung up and exhaled into silence. Not relief, not revenge, something simpler. A restoration of gravity. Across town, Kendra was holding a letter in her hand, eyes darting across the lines. Effective immediately, she read aloud to Rourke. "All financial authority is revoked. All assets frozen pending further verification." Rourke didn't respond. His gaze fixed somewhere past her shoulder, like he was waiting to wake up. No one celebrated. No one offered a toast. Online, she tried to pivot. A soft-filtered Instagram post. A caption about moving forward with grace. A staged shot of Silas smiling. Last summer. But then the leak happened. A clip. Short, clear, unedited. "He's old. Once we get the house, we'll be fine." It spread faster than she could delete it. Morella posted a comment under the blog article that had gone viral. "He built that home with his bare hands. She photoshopped him out of Christmas." Dozens replied. The storm was silent, but complete. Kendra's name, once a symbol of polished modernity, was now tagged with erasure, fraud, and a kind of cruelty that doesn't wash off. That afternoon, Silas found me at the park bench where Aurelia's name was carved into the wood. I hadn't told him to meet me, but he came anyway. "I want to help restore the house," he said, sitting beside me. "Not the walls, the meaning." I looked at him, eyes stinging. "Start with the bookshelf," I said. "Put her stories back." He nodded slowly, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a small collection. A few novels she loved. A ceramic owl she once kept on the mantel. Things I hadn't seen since August. The bookshelf would be full again, not with things, but with memory. At midnight, the sky cracked open with light. Fireworks bloomed across Tacoma in bursts of red, green, and gold. I sat alone on the porch, but not lonely. Aurelia's notebook sat on my lap, the same one she'd written birthday lists and garden plans in. I flipped to a blank page, wrote, "They tried to erase me, but in doing so, they revealed themselves." Then, underneath, "Sometimes, dignity isn't given. You reclaim it." I folded the letter I'd written earlier, slid it into an envelope marked for the Washington Foundation for Elder Advocacy. Inside, the timeline, the article, the emails, Silas's note. A new mission, not to drag names through the mud, but to make sure no one felt as invisible as I once did. I would speak, not for revenge, for the others, for those who whisper in hallways, who sit through family dinners like shadows, who hand over keys and never get thanked. I sealed the envelope and placed it in the outgoing mail bin, then turned back toward the house. Light glowed from the living room where Silas was rearranging books. I smiled and whispered to the night, to anyone listening, "Your worth does not expire with age, and silence is not surrender, it's strategy."